honor and a privilege to be here with you, everybody. And indeed, we're going to demystify this big topic of enterprise agility and the question that I want to be asking you, because agile transformations start with the individual. Will you be, you individually, you personally, will you be an agile presence or a fragile presence in the equation of your enterprise agility? And by the time we're done here over the next hour, you will be much more equipped to understand that question and to make sure that you're going to be an agile leadership presence. By answering really these backbone questions, well, why agile? What is agile? And most crucially, who can you be in the equation of your agility? And a little bit of how, where, and when do I get started? And the challenge with agile is it is an exploding universe of inspiration. It's amazing. I mean, there are digital transformation case studies. I'm sure you will be joining that list before too long, but typically of service-intensive businesses. There's just an army of evangelists of different agile software development methodologies that can be really mind-boggling and confusing. All of the big consultancy houses now have agile practices and pushing out books and research and magazine articles, and all of the classical training and coaching and consulting businesses are putting a fresh paint job on all of their classical stuff to try to hitch their wagon to the agile train. So it can be mind-boggling. And you know how I got here, as you heard from Lito, is I kind of have an intersection of real-world experiences, as we'll talk a little bit about, where I started my career working on offshore oil and gas drilling rigs for Shell International, and I now study other people in the real-world agility challenge: fighter pilots, firefighters, ER doctors, professional sports people, petroleum engineers, etc., to interpret their secrets of agility in everyday situations in the real world, bring the business experience to the table. I spent a career with a British public company, ended up running the aerospace division of that company, and translate these agility secrets into terms relevant for business. And then I spent the last 20 years in the advisory world as a coach, consultant, mentor, author, speaker, and have really understood and learned a lot about how to facilitate teams and executives and organizations to actually do agile. So I hope to bring some intersection of those things to really cut through the complexity and the hype and really get to the heart of the matter, that over 150 years ago, Charles Darwin just got to the essence of it. It's not the strongest who survive. It's not the most intelligent who survive. It's the most adaptable to change. I can't tell you the number of times people will say to me, but Mike, you don't understand. We have a really strong, development operation here, or production operation there, or marketing presence there. It's like, it doesn't matter. Yeah, but you don't understand. We have really smart people. We have PhD level people. It doesn't matter. It's not the strongest. It's not the most intelligent. It's the most adaptable to change. And so that's the essence of what agile is. It's the ability to adapt. And along the way here, over the course of our hour, we're going to bust a few myths about agility, because it is prone to lots of misinterpretations and myths and mental traps. We'll reveal some mysteries of agility, and we'll start to introduce you to the magic of agility and some of the tips and tricks and practical things that you can do starting tomorrow morning if you choose to. And there'll be a follow-up link that you can go to download some resources. And I know that Lito and the rest of the team are putting up a huge matrix of follow-on resources, tools, and templates that you can use. So we're just delighted to be getting you started on your journey here. And of course, we've used this phrase, the only constant is change. We've used that phrase forever, haven't we? But the nature of change itself has changed. That's what the challenge is these days. And of course, there's an acronym for that. It actually came out of the military, but probably for 15, 20 years already, has been widely used in the commercial world. If you Google VUCA or you pick up your favorite business magazine and you search for VUCA, you will come across this acronym very readily because, of course, it describes our challenge these days. We live in an accelerating VUCA world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and frankly, my favorite, ambiguity. It's just hard to make sense of what's going on. It's so confusing and confounding at times, and we just live in a VUCA world. And so agility is the ability to adapt in those rapidly changing circumstances that we call VUCA. That's what agility is, and most crucially, staying ahead of the other guys, the competitors, by out-executing what our competitors are able to do, but also out-executing the expectations that our different categories of stakeholders have of us. Of course, first and foremost, our customers. Continuing to wow our customers, having raving fans in our customer base. Of course, crucially, all of you, employees and team members, and exceeding your expectations with the leadership and management and teamwork that we can bring to the table. And of course, you've got some really crucial vendors and supply chain and exceeding their expectations so that you get to keep the best ones and get the best service and get the best prices. And of course, your debt holders and your shareholders so that your share price continues to do well. So that is the definition of the agility challenge. And of course, the first myth that we come across is that some people perceive that disruptive change is new. Of course it's not. We've always had disruptive change. You know, the railroad system was disruption, and then that got disrupted by the automotive freeway system, and then that got disrupted by the aviation system, and then that got disrupted by the internet system, and then that got disrupted by the social media system. So it isn't new. But what is new is the time compression and accelerated obsolescence with which that change, that VUCA change, is coming at us these days. That's what's new. That's how change has changed. And that is our VUCA and agility challenge that we have to step up to. And there's different kinds of VUCA. There's external VUCA, which is the regulatory VUCA, the government VUCA, the technological VUCA, the economic VUCA, the pandemic VUCA. There's all that external VUCA, and there's also internal VUCA. What's internal VUCA? Well, internal VUCA arises from the challenge of how do you collaborate and communicate and coordinate across, you know, such a large geography, if not globally, and how do you stay organized as an organization and a team at all of the different levels, on all of the different initiatives, in sync with each other. That's just chaos waiting to happen if we're not careful. And Agile is the answer to all of that. And we've got to do it, as Lito said, top down and bottom up simultaneously, and every level in between, so that it adds up to an operating system, an agility operating system. And the bottom line is so that we can be in the flow as an organization, we can have a presence in the face of VUCA as an organization that is agile, not fragile, and we can find that composure in the face of VUCA that is agile, not fragile. Now, another myth that we run into really quickly, especially those of you that have been researching this and you run into this army of agile software development evangelists, you would be forgiven for thinking that agile is for software companies and teams only, and in fact, agile started with software teams and IT companies. That is 100% wrong. Agile did not start with software companies. It started with hardware companies. Photocopier manufacturers, automotive manufacturers, photography manufacturers. Back in the 80s, there is a very famous article in the Harvard Business Review in 1986 called The New Product Development Game, where they studied hardware companies. And they noticed that hardware companies had changed the way that they did product development. And they'd moved to something a lot more dynamic. And for the first time ever, those of you that have studied this, they used the rugby analogy of Scrum to describe a more dynamic flow of product development. And Scrum is a word that we'll come back to as we proceed here. Scrum is a word that in some ways is synonymous with Agile, but in a practical way also has a definitive meaning as well that we will get to. So it didn't start with software companies, it started with hardware companies, and what happened was software companies went big with Agile, where hardware companies were going big with Lean and all that other continuous improvement stuff. But now even hardware companies are realizing, oops, we've got to go Agile too. The other myth that we run into very quickly, by the way, is that, well, aren't smaller companies naturally Agile and larger companies naturally aren't? No, categorically not. Smaller companies are not naturally Agile. Startups, mid-market companies, small to medium-sized companies. Smaller companies are naturally frenetic. Hair on fire, seat of the pants. As we'll discover as we proceed here, that is categorically not Agile. Now, yes, many larger companies are naturally bureaucratic, and clearly we don't want to be there either. But no, it is not the case that smaller companies are naturally Agile and larger companies are naturally not. Many, many, many larger companies, such as yourself, are going on the journey to discovering how to become more Agile, top to bottom, bottom to top, as an enterprise. And this is the journey that you're starting. So how do we go from the fragile majority to the Agile minority? That is the challenge. And obviously there's various steps to go through. There's a whole journey to go on to develop this agility operating system. And we can't possibly begin to get into all of that complexity today. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus in on the middle step. And we're going to focus in on you. And how do you develop your Agile leadership presence? That's where we're going to focus. We're going to focus on you. Because Agile transformation journeys start with the individual. And what I'm going to introduce you to today is I'm going to introduce you to the 5 key attributes of agility to change your relationship with. And those invite you to step up to 5 roles of everyday Agile leaders. This is where we're headed together today. I want you to become students of agility. That's all I really want you to do today. I hope that you will go to the link. I hope that you will download some practical tools and tips. And I hope that you will decide to start doing a few things tomorrow morning. But at the bottom line, I just want you to flick a switch up here and decide to become a student of this. And next time you're walking past a meeting or a breakout group at a conference that's about agility, next time you see a book as you walk through the airport in the bookstore, next time you see a cover article of a magazine that crosses your desk and you see anything about agility, I invite you not to drive by anymore. I invite you to stop, pause, pick it up and dig in, because your future pivots on agility more than you realize. Now, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is you already know how to do this. Trust me, there is nothing that I'm about to share with you today that you haven't already mastered in the driving seat of your car. Trust me. You already have an Agile leadership presence in the driving seat of your car. You've already changed your relationship with these 5 key attributes of agility, and you've already stepped up to the 5 roles of everyday Agile leaders. That is very good news. The bad news is, and by the way, you've achieved an Agile flow, an Agile presence, and an Agile composure in doing that. The bad news is that when you park in the lot outside your office and walk inside, why do you leave those skills in the parking lot? Why don't you take them in with you? Well, because it's complicated. That's where it starts to get hard. And the question becomes, how do we achieve the same agile flow, the same agile presence, the same agile composure that I just had in the driving seat of my car? How do I achieve that in the driving seat of my business, or my role in my business, in the face of VUCA? That is the challenge. But it's great news. You already know how to do this in the driving seat of your car. And what I'm going to reveal to you is that the 5 key attributes of agility that you've changed your relationship with hang around the backbone of the word agile. In terms of cracking the code of agility, that word agile is the key.